So here's a little mini project for today. I'm often working on small electronic projects in the car, like interior lighting and TVs. I'm putting Alexa in, Raspberry Pis as media servers, stuff like that. And while I'm figuring it out, I need to keep powering things up and then powering them down again, powering them up. And if I'm not running the engine, then that will drain the battery sooner or later. And I don't want to keep starting the car every time just for like two minutes so I can test something. So this is a small project just to build a little power supply. So I went down Hardhoff, and they have buckets and buckets of these power supplies from old stuff that people don't want anymore. This one was 300 yen, which is about £2, and it's 12 volts, same as a car, and 4 amps. 4 amps is plenty for most projects. You rarely go beyond that. If you do, you have to tap off the battery anyway. So this power supply is ideal, but the end of it, is just going to be like this, and it's a bit of a pain to keep crimping things on and crimping things off, especially if you want to do power two things at once. You have to start making splits and stuff. So instead, I'm going to use this power supply, but from Wish, kind of like the AliExpress app. I ordered a bunch of stuff. So first of all, I ordered this case with a handle which moves, so it can kind of go up and down, and then some parts. So I got a bunch of these fuse holders, a bag of those, and this bag is the speaker style crimps for connectors, and a bunch of the banana plug sockets, which also act as clamps, so you can clamp a wire directly to that, and a couple of cigarette lighter sockets. They might come in handy. This is a power meter, so I can see exactly what volts and current I'm drawing. Well, it should be 12 volts, but I can see what currents I'm drawing, so that would be handy. And a couple of small other things, like these are actually meant to be battery packs, 9-volt battery packs, but they look convenient as little flaps, so I can cut the back out and then use this to store things inside, and some typical leads with clamps and then banana plugs on the other end. So all of this put together was maybe, I don't know, 20-25 quid, so not much. Had to wait a while for it all to arrive. So now I'm basically going to put this power supply into this case, and then put in a bunch of these connectors on the front. So I can plug this into the mains and then have this as a nice portable little power supply in the car that I can power my projects as I work. So I'll put it all together and then show more when I've got something to show. So now I've mounted some of the connectors into the front panel. We have 2 sets of the speaker style clamps, 3 sets of banana plug sockets, which also act as clamps, 1 cigarette lighter socket, and the power meter. Now originally I actually cut the hole to have 2 cigarette lighters sockets, and the power meter I was going to mount on the top here, but when I came to assemble the case together, the bolts to hold the bottom of the case to the top of the case go all the way through like this, like that, and actually this socket was blocking the bolt, so I had to take it out, widen the hole lengthways, and now the bolt to hold the case together just clears the case. So that's why I did it this way, which is fine. One of these is probably enough anyway. I rarely use them. So that's the basic layout, and now I'm going to connect all these together. So I'm going to solder all the positive and negative in parallel, and I'm going to have a fuse mounted somewhere. I might put the fuse here, or I might put the fuse on the back. And that's about it really. So I've just got to solder them together and then somehow fit the power supply inside. So now the soldering is pretty much complete. I mounted the fuse here. The power supply is rated for 4 amps, but 4 amp fuse is a bit hard to find, so I popped a 3 in for now. And the circuitry is pretty simple. So this is the positive coming from the power supply, which is going into the fuse. Then everything else is coming out of the fuse. So all the positive and all the negative are just wired together in parallel, and then you bridge the power meter across them. It was a pretty simple circuit that came with it. Got it on my phone. Just like that. So very simple stuff. The soldering is not that neat because I'm not that good at it. You can see it's a bit just blobbed on, but it's good enough. I've checked everything. So these are my 2 main leads now, my positive and negative for the DC output from the power supply. Everything here is rated up to a maximum of 30 volts and 10 amps, so I left that in case I change the power supply later to remind myself. So the front panel is pretty much done. So now I can mount it into the case like so, and this is how the interior looks. So there's quite a bit of space here. I've hacked off a few of these little plastic mounts because I want to attach the power supply flat to the bottom. So now I can fit my power supply in somehow. I think it's going to be like somewhere around here, and I'm just going to hot glue it into place to hold it steady. And it's pretty much the same height as the case anyway, so it shouldn't rock about. And then I'm going to connect these two using this type of connector, so that in the future when I want to swap out the power supply, it's pretty easy. I just have to open up these and then replace the power supply. Finally, for the back panel, I found these 9-volt battery cases, which I quite like the flap on them. So what I'm thinking is, on the back panel I'm going to mount 2 of these, one that way, and then I've already cut the back of one of them, so I took the back off, and it makes it quite a neat little door, because I plan to store jumper cables inside here. And this one I've already cut a little notch out of, so the main power supply can come out of here and I can still close the door. So now I'll fit the power supply inside the case. So you can see here that I have hot glued the power supply to the bottom of the case, and to stop these 2 leads from flapping about, just a little dab of hot glue to hold these in place. Then I have the positive and negative DC coming out and going to my front power board. So that's the front panel like that. Then on the back I made this separator out of a little piece of foam board, and then just a spot of hot glue to hold it in place against the back of the power supply. Now this gives me this nice big cavity here where I can store cables, and the reason for putting this separator on is when I'm stuffing all the cables back in, I'm not going to worry about hitting these contacts and interfering with them and breaking stuff. It keeps it all nice and safe. And just one little notch cut out, because the only lead that has to come through to the back of the unit is the mains plug. So now I'm going to put the front and the back panel in, bolt the case together, and then show you the final result. And here is the finished result. So this handle can lock into multiple positions. I quite like it like this, like that, so you can stand it up, which is quite nice. And on the back there's the access panels for the cable storage. So on this side I have the mains cable, which pulls out, And this is why I left the little notch here so that the cable can come out while the door is closed. And on this side I've put some jumper cables, so it's quite a convenient little storage. I've put quite a few cables in there. So these have got banana plugs on one end and crocodile clips on the other, so they'll come in handy when I need, you know, to hook something up. So it's quite handy having the cables stored in the back as well. And you can see how big that storage is, so I could maybe put quite a few things inside here. So this all worked out quite well, so let me just hook it up to the mains and then show you it in action. So here it is up and running, and you can see from the readout I have 12 volts and I'm currently running a load of 0 amps. So to test it, this is an Echo Spot which runs on 12 volts. So I'm going to hook it up using the jumper cables, plug it in, and as it starts up we'll see the load start to increase. Right now I'm drawing around 0.1 amps. Probably by the time this is fully up and running it'll be drawing a bit more. So this is very useful for testing also, because when I'm running devices I want to know roughly how much current I'm pulling. So we can see that the Echo seems to be pulling around 0.2, maybe 0.3. It's not fully up and running yet, maybe a little more. So I can just monitor this for a bit and then see what my requirements are. And I could even run quite a few things off here as long as I don't run over the 3 amps. As soon as I hit the 3 amps, then the fuse should trip. And the power supply is rated up to 4 amps. So there you go. Seems to be working well. Does exactly what I want, and it was pretty cheap to do. Maybe £20, 25 quid, which is not bad for a little portable power supply, which has storage for the leads and multiple connector types. Yeah, it should be very useful now when I'm doing my car projects. So, if ever I needed to modify this for another purpose, I could very easily open it up, swap out that power supply inside, and then run a different voltage. There you go. Project done.